Here's something you definitely don't hear a senator say every day.
So tonight I want to talk about Signalgate and what a colossal up this is in terms of our national security.
Yeah, we bleeped it, but he said it. I'm pretty sure you know what he said out there. I mean, remember, as a congressman, Adam Schiff was the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee. He was the lead impeachment manager during Donald Trump's first impeachment hearing. And in all that time, and I could be wrong here, check me if I'm wrong, I don't think I have heard him use the F word in public to describe how colossal of a screw-up something was. But he knows all too well how our nation's most sensitive communications should be handled and how they shouldn't.
I used to serve as the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee. When I traveled overseas, first of all, I didn't bring my personal electronics with me. I brought a burner phone, and even then, I was told, don't email, don't text anything of national security importance or significance. Certainly never text anything anywhere that's classified.
Now, that specific point he just made was seemingly aimed at Trump's director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, and Stephen Witkoff, who is Trump's decades-long friend turned special envoy. Senator Schiff sent a 3-page letter to Gabbard and Witkoff today expressing grave concern that both took part in the security breach while they were, quote, traveling in high-threat environments that pose significant counterintelligence risks to U.S. personnel and devices. Now, in particular, Schiff noted this. Director Gabbard was on a multi-nation tour, including visits to Japan, Thailand, and India during the time frame at issue. And Mr. Witkoff was in Russia when National Security Advisor Waltz established the messaging group. Mr. Witkoff reportedly arrived in Russia on March 13th at noon local time and was added to this group chat around 12 hours later. Reporting indicates that Mr. Witkoff met with Russian President Putin until 1:30 a.m. local time and left Moscow after the meeting. This means that Mr. Witkoff appeared to be receiving sensitive national intelligence information while in Moscow, and based on this timeline, may have been in direct meetings with the Kremlin when some of the messages were exchanged. That's all from Schiff's letter. Now, Witkoff says he didn't have his personal phone with him, just, quote, a secure phone provided by the government for special circumstances. Now, was that a burner phone? Was his phone with signal left on the plane? And again, what other signal chains were there between high-level national security officials? Those are some of my questions. But more importantly, Senator Schiff has some questions, too. And he's demanding answers to 12 detailed questions from both Gabbard and Witkoff by Monday. It isn't also just Democrats who are worried. The New York Times notes that Republican Congressman Brian Fitzpatrick of Pennsylvania plans to send an inquiry to Gabbard's office. Plus, Republican Senator Roger Wicker of Mississippi, who leads the Senate Armed Services Committee, said, quote, definitely will be looking into this. At least 4 other Republican senators have voiced their concerns, too, including 3 members of the Senate Intelligence Committee, Mike Rounds, Jerry Moran, and Texas Senator John Cornyn, who had this to say, quote, sounds like a huge screw-up. I mean, is there any other way to describe it? I don't think you should use Signal for classified information. True. Now, Republican senators had to accept a lot to help Hegseth squeak through confirmation, which is important to remember in this moment. Because today, after just 60 days on the job, Hegseth is facing a massive scandal that's only getting worse the more the Trump team distracts, and seems to be lying about what happened. All while a growing number of Democrats are openly calling for his resignation. Joining me now is California Democratic Senator Adam Schiff, a member of the Senate Judiciary Committee and a former member of the House Intelligence Committee, who used the word we bleeped for good reason. Senator, we spoke about this Signal group chat 2 nights ago, and at that time, none of us had seen, the public had not seen, you nor I had seen what was exactly in the thread of information that Secretary Hegseth had provided. Now it was published in the Atlantic this morning. I thought it was pretty stunning. What did you think when you read that level of detail?
Well, first of all, as for my use of an obscenity, I'm running out of adjectives and expletives over the last couple months. But what really leapt out at me when I looked at the transcript of this was the specificity with regards to one of the targets, and that was someone described as their top missile guy. But he was apparently struck while in his girlfriend's building. Now, the problem with this being disclosed, the problem with discussing this kind of thing on an unsecured device, on a commercial app, is that what the Houthis are going to do now is they're going to essentially try to reverse engineer. They're going to try to figure out, how did they know where he was? Was his electronics communicated? Was his girlfriend's electronics communicated, compromised? Was there a personal source? Was the girlfriend the source? Was a friend of the girlfriend's the source? They're going to try to identify our sources and methods. And this is why this is not only classified, but would be considered top secret classified, because it could reveal sources and methods, which means not only did they put potentially pilots at risk, as you've outlined, not only did they put the success of the mission at risk, but they also potentially compromise future missions. Because if the Houthis can now identify, was this a human source? Was this a technical source? They can switch their tradecraft. They can kill a human source. They can do away with an electronic source. So it has far-reaching implications. And what was so notable to me also about this is just the complete deflection of responsibility from the very top down. You've got Donald Trump saying, oh, you know, it wasn't me. I don't know anything about this. Well, why should I know anything about this? I'm only the commander-in-chief. Why are you bringing Hegseth into this? And Hegseth is saying, there were no war plans. And you've got Tulsi Gabbard saying, was I on this text chat? And then later, I have no idea where I was during these conversations. I could have been in any country. You've got Radcliffe, the head of the CIA, saying, I didn't transmit classified information. No, somebody else did. I'm only the CIA director. What responsibility do I have over classified information? So it's what happens when you put people who are completely unqualified, disqualified in these positions. You're going to get colossal F-ups like this one.
No doubt. I mean, none of it. We could have seen a lot of this coming. You called a lot of versions of this could be coming. So I referenced in the introduction here, you sent this list of questions over. Specifically, it sounds like to Tulsi Gabbard and Stephen Witkoff. What question do you most want answered from them?
Well, I think it's really the question that you asked, which is, this is not the first time that they've been using a commercial app for completely inappropriate discussions. It just can't be. There is an acceptance by everybody on that chat of the normalcy of what they're doing. And I can't imagine that this was because it was the first time that they're invited to this Houthi private chat. So this has been done before. And to me, more important than the records keeping issue, the legality of that, which is important, is what else may have been compromised now. Because our adversaries, particularly the more sophisticated ones like China and Russia and others, they know who has what device. They know where those devices are. If those devices were ever left unattended, and Witkoff says, I didn't have it with me, so it was left somewhere. If they get access to that device, they now have access to that chat. And so what else has been compromised? And frankly, anything they discussed on these devices now has to be presumed to have been compromised. So not only should the Congress find out, but the intelligence community is going to have a need to know, if they're doing their jobs, what else were they talking about? We have to assume it's compromised. We have to assume that these sources may have been burned. We have to take measures to protect any human sources now. This is the kind of now back work that will be done in the IC, if they're doing it at all. But, the deflection responsibility suggests also to us, they're not going to do all this work. There's an arrogance here mixed in with the incompetence, which is dangerous.
I mean, it's also impossible, just to echo what you just said, to do a damage assessment of who's at risk and what operations are at risk and what sources are at risk without knowing what other signal chains there were and what the topics were discussed. Senator Adam Schiff, I always enjoy talking to you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you making the time tonight.
Thank you.
Everybody but the President of the United States does seem to understand the stakes here. I'm joined now by the ranking member of the Intelligence Committee, Senator Mark Warner, Democrat of Virginia. Senator, it almost seems preposterous to argue about whether it's classified. It just seems to me that, as a civilian, that the timing of an imminent surprise attack is classified by its very nature.
Chris, this is a no-brainer. And, what I'd ask Hegseth or the president, why don't they pick up the phone and call some of the parents of the sailors who were on the aircraft carrier, the Truman, that deployed from Virginia, when their sons and daughters were flying some of these planes? If that information about where and when we were going to launch this attack was obtained by the Houthis, they could have deployed their defenses, which are pretty damn good. They've taken down planes in the past, and American lives would have been lost. If you don't understand that, if you don't get the fact that you don't reveal that kind of information before an attack like this happens, it's so fundamental. And the notion that they are trying to argue semantics of whether this is an attack plan or a war plan or a battle plan, the bottom line is what Americans realize. These guys got caught making a royal classic screw up. They won't acknowledge it. This weakens us not only in terms of our intelligence community, people saying, holy heck, I'm working for leadership that doesn't have my back, and what it says about our credibility around the world. You can't put this genie back in the bottle with this kind of incompetence. So yes, Hegseth should go, he should resign or get fired. And if there is not accountability and we allow this to go on, the signal that sends to the rest of the world, the signal that sends to, like, if you're in the military, if you think your lives could be put frankly, in danger because your leadership doesn't keep confidential your action plans, this is not hard to figure out.
This is a strange situation because of how freakishly bizarre and catastrophic the error was. Like, they looped in a journalist, okay? But it also seems that this is, from everything we can tell, de rigueur for them. But this is an MO. They are routinely doing this. And I thought this was pretty interesting. As far as we know, and best we know, that these are on their private phones. These are not on government-issued phones. Der Spiegel having reporting today in which they basically go out to the dark web and they find that the private contact details of the most important security advisors can be found on the internet. Mobile phone numbers, email addresses, even some passwords belonging to top officials. Most of these numbers are apparently still in use. Some of them linked to profiles on Instagram, LinkedIn, WhatsApp. Hostile intelligence services could use this publicly available data to hack the communications of those affected by installing spyware on their devices. Do you feel like we have an enormous four-alarm fire here in terms of this administration's openness to foreign intelligence service?
Yes, and I'd also say this is not a one-off. Let's just recap the fact that this is a pattern of sloppiness, a pattern of irresponsibility. Excuse me, the first 2 weeks in office, they inadvertently exposed the identities of 200 CIA agents.
Yep.
That means those young men and women can't be deployed around the world. Virtually every day, Musk and the Doge boys puts out knowingly or just stupidly classified information. The example is, like, they listed a bunch of federal properties they thought could be for sale. Well, one of them was a classified site. Or the fact that you've got the Doge 25-year-old kid looking through some of the Treasury accounts, because the truth is there are places where we try to hide operations in foreign nations, and things can be revealed that way. So if this was a one-off, you still wouldn't excuse it. And I can just tell you, Chris, if this had been a military officer or if this had been a CIA case officer who'd made this mistake, they would be fired, no questions asked. And what makes it particularly galling is when the Director of National Intelligence self-righteously tweets 12 days ago, I think it was, anybody leaks, we're going to pursue them to the full extent of the law. Well, does that apply to the leadership that is not ready for prime time? Does that apply that this is going to be just passed by? The damage that's done, you can't rectify this. And again, I go back to the initial point. They didn't have even the common decency to acknowledge, at least publicly, everybody on the Hill, doesn't matter what your party is saying, holy heck, how did this screw up happen? But they try to think they can just push their way through. This puts American lives at risk. and obviously, further destroys our reputation with our partners, which we need. America first doesn't mean America alone, and that's where we're headed, and that will make our country less safe.
I want to just make sure I understand. You believe that Pete Hegseth should either resign or be fired, yes?
There's no question. I mean, the questions I have is, he didn't probably type this up. So this whole, thing that was posted, is it posted in other group chats?
Right.
Is there somewhere else this may appear? And the notion, again, I'm not getting nerdy out here, but has anybody collected their phones yet and make sure there's not malware?
Yes.
As you pointed out, the Der Spiegel, if you've got the phone number of an individual, the bad guys can place malware on. They don't have to touch your phone. That's why cyber, that's why security. It's like, I didn't think this crowd could still make my head explode, but my head's been exploding the last couple of days.
President Trump has not fired anyone for this debacle, which is astonishing. He did confess to NBC News in a new interview that he sees this as a, quote, glitch. A glitch. He said this scandal has been, quote, the only glitch in 2 months. This is kind of emerging as his take on this scandal. He told reporters yesterday, they've made a big deal out of this because we've had 2 perfect months. Essentially saying that this scandal with all of his senior appointees, including his White House chief of staff, all discussing these forthcoming battle plans over Signal in a group text that they didn't notice included a journalist. He thinks this is all a hoax. This is now, he's used the phrase witch hunt. This has all been ginned up as if it's something bad. They're trying to make it look bad because he's otherwise had 2 perfect months. This is the only thing that even looks bad. Everything else has been. And, I will just say, between you and me, you have been alive for these past 2 months. And you have experienced what the first 2 months of this Trump term have been like. Do you think that Trump is right, that it's all been totally perfect? This has been the only glitch? I mean, just, back of the envelope scratching here. It was a week or so after he was sworn in, January 29th, a jet carrying 64 people hit an Army helicopter above the Potomac River outside Reagan National Airport in D.C. Everybody on both aircraft killed. The day before that collision, he had offered air traffic controllers all across the country a somewhat threatening buyout, trying to basically beg them to leave government service. Less than a week later, Trump reversed course. Oh, actually, no, maybe that's a bad idea. Air traffic controllers, please don't leave. That same week was when we started to get the headlines about the kids who Trump's top campaign donor, Elon Musk, had brought in to his new agency to work with him to destroy the federal government. Turns out one DOJ staffer actually had to resign when it came out that he had a since-deleted social media account in which he had advocated for loud and proud racism and racial human breeding tactics through eugenics. They soon hired him back. Another DOJ staffer had been previously fired from a cybersecurity firm for leaking company secrets. He also worked at a startup that hired convicted hackers. He went by the online moniker Big Balls. We would later learn that Trump and Elon Musk, in their infinite wisdom, specifically gave Big Balls, who again had been fired from a previous job at a cybersecurity firm for leaking company secrets. Trump and Musk gave that specific kid access to the systems at the top U.S. cybersecurity agency. Great choice. Then Trump fired the staff of the nation's nuclear security agency, the people who oversee the nation's nuclear weapons stockpile. Then Trump scrambled to unfire all of those nuclear safety workers because, oops, but in many cases, they couldn't figure out how to reach them because in their infinite wisdom, they forgot to collect contact information from those nuclear security workers before cutting them all off from their government email accounts. This includes people with Q-level security clearances who are cleared for access to our nation's top nuclear secrets. Those are great folks to lose track of and to fire for no cause. Trump then fired people at the CDC in charge of tracking the ongoing bird flu outbreak. That turned out to be a mistake as well. They then tried to hire all those people back, but didn't get them all back. Trump then instituted not only firings, but a hiring freeze that applied to, among other things, the national parks. Why is it particularly bad to do that at the national parks? Well, among other things, the national parks every year have to hire a whole new cast of employees for seasonal employment because the national parks have greatly increased visitors during vacation season. Hiring freeze isn't going to work at the national parks, right? They have to hire lots of new people every year. So they did that, and then, oops, turns out they realized they couldn't do that. Turns out it would be wildly dangerous to radically understaff American national parks. Who knew? So they had to reverse that, too. Then a few days after that reversal, we saw them again scrambling to rehire people they had fired from the FDA this time. Headline. FDA scrambles to rehire entire teams overseeing medical devices after DOJ fired them all, saying their terminations are, quote, rescinded effective immediately. By this point, we're about a month in to the perfect 2 months. It was February 22nd, just about exactly a month in, when Elon Musk sent his first "What did you do last week?" email. He demanded that all federal employees email his DOJ teenagers a list of what they got done that week, or else it would be cause for immediate firing. That threat then promptly was deflated. Within 24 hours, the leaders of multiple agencies in the government, people in Trump's cabinet like Tulsi Gabbard say, told their workers and their agencies explicitly don't reply to Elon's email. Womp womp. At that point, Elon Musk had a running list of all the massive and spectacular savings he and his kids at DOJ had found by cutting out supposed fraud and waste from the federal government. They claimed to have found billions of dollars in fraud. It was all on their website for you to see. But then February 25th, the New York Times reported that the 5 largest items on that list had just quietly disappeared because it turns out they hadn't actually saved all that money. They'd just done all the math wrong. Day after the rug was pulled out from under DOJ on that, they had to erase another big cut from their list. DOJ claimed they had found $2 billion of waste and fraud to cut out from VA. Turns out a lot of that money was for stuff like, medical services for veterans, cancer programs for veterans with cancer, burial services for veterans who die. Boy, that really does sound wasteful, right? So yeah, again, oops, they had to reverse course on that. Reinstate some of that stuff. Saturday after that was March 1st. We learned another obvious but alarming side effect to all of Trump and Musk's firings through the federal government. CNN reported that U.S. intelligence showed that Russia and China were rushing to take advantage of the moment and working hard to recruit as many disgruntled workers as intelligence assets as they could get. You tired of all the winning yet? You tired of all the perfection? The very next day, Sunday, March 2nd, the Dow started its trip off the cliff after Trump said he was going to go through with his tariffs on our closest trading partners, like Mexico and Canada and also China. The next day, you could watch live on the Fox News channel as the stock market tumbled down and down and down while Trump doubled down, down, down on his tariffs. Since then, we've seen industry after industry come forward to say just how much the tariffs have been just slaying them economically, but Trump is plowing ahead. A week after tanking the stock market with that incipient trade war, Trump pulled yet another reversal. Since taking office, he's been insisting on using military aircraft for deportations, been making a huge deal about these deportations, deporting migrants, many of whom we now know had no criminal history whatsoever. But he wanted to make a big deal out of the fact that he was using military aircraft to send them where? To Guantanamo. Very transparent stunt to get footage like this to use for propaganda purposes. It was also unbelievably eye-wateringly expensive. So quietly on March 5th, they stopped using the military aircraft. And a week later, they stopped using Guantanamo. They returned everybody they'd been holding there back stateside. Because they'd already got all their propaganda films made. Don't tell anybody, we're just not doing that anymore. Along the way, in their hunt to rid everything in the federal government of diversity, equity, inclusion, they purged a photo of the plane that dropped the atomic bomb on Japan from a Defense Department database. We believe that's because the plane, the Enola Gay, has the word gay in its name. So obviously just having pictures of that plane anywhere is going to make everybody gay. Look what it did to me. The next week, people still employed by the FDA and ordered back to the office told reporters they had returned to find offices that could not fit them with broken equipment and not enough chairs for people to sit in. Last week, Trump released the JFK assassination files, unredacted, including 400 unredacted Social Security numbers and birth dates and birthplaces. Trump managed, among other things, to dox his own lawyer, who only found out Trump had done it when a reporter called to ask him about it. Also last week, the New York Times was first to report that Elon Musk was about to get, the very next morning, a top secret briefing for the U.S. military plan for any war that might break out with China. After he says he saw that report, Trump, quote, contacted White House Chief of Staff and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth to ask them, hey, what's this briefing you're doing for Elon? That sounds like a big deal. He learned about it in the New York Times, he says. And so then they called it off. And briefly, that was a, stop everything, what the heck is going on news, right? The president's top campaign donor, with all of his business ties to China and his multi-billion-dollar debts to the Chinese, getting a briefing on the U.S. military plans for going to war with China? But, just to show you how these first 2 months of the Trump term is going, here's the news from the very next day. After Trump announced there would be no such Elon Musk-China war plan briefing, this is the Washington Post, Saturday, March 22nd, just 4 days ago. Tax revenue could drop by 10% amid turmoil at IRS. Staff cuts and disruptions related to DOGE have officials bracing for a sharp loss of revenue for the U.S. government. The prediction officials say is directly tied to changing taxpayer behavior and President Trump's rapid demolition of parts of the IRS. Rapid demolition. Neat. Seems like DOGE, if those predictions seem to be borne out at IRS, will have succeeded in robbing the United States government of $500 billion in revenue it would have otherwise received because, again, in their infinite wisdom, they have decided to destroy the IRS, which collects money to fund the government. Everybody who's ever run a business knows that the most efficient thing you can do in getting your bottom line straight of your business is to make sure you no longer have the capacity to earn any money, right? It's been perfect. These 2 months have been, other than this little glitch with the giant group text about forthcoming military operations, everything has been perfect.
Nobody's texting war plans. Well, I noticed this morning, out came something that doesn't look like war plans. And as a matter of fact, they even changed the title to attack plans because they know it's not war plans. There's no units, no locations, no routes, no flight paths, no sources, no methods, no classified information.
No accountability and no acknowledgement of a mistake. We are back with Annie, Luke, and Paul. For those of us who have not served, I think you can sort of listen to him and say, is that right? Is that true? For you, having actually spent time, what do you think when you hear him say that?
It's bullshit. It's totally, I'm sorry, I got to say, that's what it is. Everybody's saying it around the whole country who's ever served in uniform. It's garbage. Everybody knows, back to World War II, loose lips sink ships. Right? He can play word games. He's a master communicator, maybe a master manipulator. But the question, again, is did you divulge anything that could have gotten anybody hurt? And he can't answer that question because he knows he's in trouble there. He's going to continue to try to spin it. But I also think it's important to see that they're flustered. He's flustered. And when the Secretary of Defense is flustered, that means our entire Pentagon is impacted. We don't have a chairman of the Joint Chiefs who's gone through. We don't have senior leadership. It doesn't set a calm, steady, strong example. And that's what we need right now to the world. And I think all of the most junior people in the military right now I wish we could do a poll. Go to any military base in America and ask them what they think of this situation. If they could talk honestly, they would say it's garbage and they know it.
I'm intrigued by this conversation about accountability, and our team was trying to figure out what a parallel would be here. And of course, there is none because we've not had someone in recent memory with this type of security clearance do this. So the most serious breach, most recent breach, was Jack Teixeira. He was sentenced to 15 years in prison in November for sharing classified information on private Discord servers to impress an online gaming community. The airman posted classified documents on U.S. intelligence provided to Ukraine. Involving South Korea and Israel. His wing commander, Air Force Colonel Sean Riley, received administrative action and was relieved of command. I mean, his wing commander was relieved of command, but they're not talking about any accountability for Hegseth.
No, and that's the standard. The standard should be the same for a National Guard private all the way up to the Secretary of Defense. And the military is built on standards and expectations and rules. And anybody with honor, anybody with competence will know if they broke the rule, they have to take accountability. And the real question is, are they still doing it? Are they still doing it right now? And there have been some examples where I think Trump said Walsh screwed up. Okay, so if they screwed up, what are you doing about it? What changes are you implementing across the force to ensure it doesn't happen again going forward? And you hear nothing about that. So if they really do want to have accountability, they have to talk about changes. They have to admit failure or admit there's a problem, hold someone accountable, and then implement changes across the system to ensure it doesn't happen again. Because not just reporters are listening. It could be foreign assets listening. They thought it was Jeffrey Goldberg. What if it wasn't Jeffrey Goldberg?
Right.
Then we could have had a much bigger problem.
There was an op-ed by Sabrina Singh. She made the argument that Pete Hegseth, not Mike Walls, who made the biggest mistake in this Signal chat. She writes, it was Hegseth who put the precise timing and sequencing of the entire operation into an unclassified text app. It was Hegseth who revealed the aircraft that would be used to conduct the strikes before the operation took place. It was Hegseth who moved classified information to a commercial text app that could have been intercepted by our adversaries. And it was Hegseth who put our brave service members, including the fighter pilots preparing to conduct the operation, in mortal danger. What happened in the Congress you covered that they absolutely conceded their oversight capacity?
Right. Well, in the past Congress, Mike Johnson became Speaker, and he owes his speakership to Donald Trump. Donald Trump tanked the candidacy of Tom Emmer with a tweet. And so Mike Johnson knows all too well who is responsible for him being Speaker and having his power. So the last thing in the world Speaker Johnson wants to do is launch an investigation into the Trump administration. And you saw his comments. You know, he maybe mildly criticized this, but he brushed it aside essentially and said, there's nothing to see here. What more can we investigate, essentially? Now, of course, you played Roger Wicker, and maybe the Senate will do something, but I cannot see this House controlled the way it is by the forces on the right investigating the Trump administration.
And when you say this House with the forces on the right, that means also Johnson with a caucus that is dominated by the forces on the right.
Yeah, I mean, this is like it started last Congress, where with such slim majorities, where they were down to one vote majority last cycle. So really any member can make themselves the deciding vote and put themselves in the middle of negotiations and matter and get attention. And so this group of far right members got outsized power because the Republican conference couldn't function without them being on board. This is why Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert have power. Every single member of that conference has power when you have a one-seat majority. And that's the conference that Johnson is in charge of. Although at this point, Trump is really keeping them together. I mean, Johnson's main move when he needs Republicans to get behind and vote for something is, well, you're not going to do that. You're going to have to tell the president yourself. That's kind of the move.
Amazing that he will spend his energy screaming at people on a cell phone in the cloakroom, but not actually taking his own defense secretary to task.
A lot of focus on the major scandals that we're seeing every day, and actually too many to name or totally get your arms around. But it's also important to stay aware of what is happening out in our country, where we are seeing the Trump administration almost every week snatch people right off the streets for political speech. The latest, most chilling example happened yesterday outside Boston, when a PhD student and Fulbright scholar at Tufts University, in this country on a student visa from Turkey, totally legal, obviously, was taken off a residential street in Somerville, Massachusetts at 5:15 p.m. yesterday. Ramesa Ozturk had just left her apartment when she's approached by a guy in a dark hoodie and hat who then grabs her hands. You can see and hear how upset and scared she is as an officer finally pulls out a badge and appears to identify himself as law enforcement. She is quickly surrounded by half a dozen, I guess, cops, all in street clothes, covering their faces with masks. They take her cell phone. They physically remove her backpack. She is then handcuffed as a bystander films and asks how anyone is supposed to know these people are police.
Is covering your faces. You want to take those masks off? Is this a kidnapping? Yeah, you don't look like it. Why are you hiding your faces? Why are you hiding your faces?
The masked police lead the terrified woman to their unmarked vehicles and drive off. Now, if all that were not chilling enough, an attorney for Ozturk released a statement earlier today saying, in part, "We are unaware of her whereabouts and have not been able to contact her. No charges have been filed against her to date that we are aware of." Last night, a district court judge ordered that the young woman not be moved out of Massachusetts without first providing advance notice. And then late this afternoon, we finally got an idea of where she is. According to the Immigrations and Customs Enforcement detainee locator, she is currently being held in the South Louisiana ICE Processing Center. That's nearly 2,000 miles from where she was snatched off the street just 27 hours ago. Today, the Department of Homeland Security said in a statement that investigations found Ozturk engaged in activities in support of Hamas. But again, she's not charged with any crime. The activities she is accused of seem to be that she co-wrote an editorial in the Tufts School newspaper that was published a year ago today, writing, quote, "We affirm the equal dignity and humanity of all people," specifically referencing Palestinians, going on to quote the author James Baldwin and challenging the university president to, quote, "acknowledge the Palestinian genocide and embrace efforts by students to evaluate diverse and sometimes contradictory ideas and opinions." Tonight, in response to her detention, more than 1,000 people at snap notice showed up in Somerville to protest and call for her return. Rumeysa Ozturk is not charged with a crime because she did not commit a crime. She's here on a visa, and the government does have the discretion to terminate a visa. But is this how America does that now? A terrified young student snatched off the street by masked police force, taken thousands of miles across the country without anyone knowing? It is as flatly authoritarian as anything we have seen in this country.
I want to bring in General Barry McCaffrey. General, so much to ask you about because there's this talk back and forth depending on what, I guess, political party each member of Congress is, where they talk about what is and what is not classified information, what is dangerous information that has been shared, and what is not dangerous information that has been shared. In general, I just want to, you with this vast experience that you have, let me just go into that one bit of the chat, which is under Pete Hegseth's line when he says, team update, time now, 11:45 Eastern, weather is favorable. Just confirmed with CENTCOM that we are go for mission launch. And then 12:15, F-18s launch. 1:45, trigger-based F-18 first strike window starts. Target terrorist, that is known location, so should be on time. Also, strike drones launch. These are the MQ-9s. At 14:10, more F-18s launch. Second strike package. 14:15, strike drones on target. This is when the first bombs will definitely drop, pending earlier trigger-based targets. There's a little bit more of the information launch about what has been carried out, what is being carried out. General, just reading it as is this information that would be classified?
Jose, this is almost childish fifth grade behavior. Pending military operations are clearly classified. You give the target 2 hours notice, they can man their weapon systems. The high-value targets can disperse. They can take countermeasures, attempt to against the carrier itself. Obviously, it's classified information. It was a major breach in protocol. The larger issue, by far, is that they were using a commercially encrypted app instead of the billion-dollar system for protecting information. If this had been Navy lieutenant commander talking to an Air Force major, they've both been fired and probably court-martialed. It's a shameful breach for security. What they need to be doing now is go back. They've obviously been using this for sensitive discussions and figure out what else has been breached to adversary nations, to include now European Union members who don't trust what we're up to in NATO. This is outrageous incompetence on the part of the most senior officers in government.
And so, General, a few of the questions on what you just said. First of all, it seems as though, at least in the text here, there was no previous to the incident, the F-18s launching and the MQ-9s launching. There is, it seems, nothing preliminarily. In other words, there's nothing, we're going to be doing this in X time. But why is it that you say that Signal is already a dangerous app to be using vis-a-vis the authorized and created, systems that the United States government has in place?
Well, look, we spent a lot of money and a lot of creativity and continually update these systems. We have these multi-million-dollar SCIFs, a secure room that can't be penetrated electronically. We have travel packages for senior officials in government. We go to great lengths to protect classified information. The most sensitive being pending military operations. And we should also assume that if you're not in that government system, if you're on commercial encryption, that many foreign intelligence agencies have probably penetrated it. They shouldn't have asked the NSA director, the four-star general, during the hearing, have you penetrated Signal as an app to listen to foreign adversaries who may be using it? But I would bet you they have. There's nothing that can't be broken eventually. But we spent a lot of money to keep these kind of conversations in U.S. government comm systems. This was an egregious breach of security that put Navy combat flyers at risk.
Hagar, you've worked with the National Security Council during your time in the White House. Was Signal a system that you saw being utilized at any time, number one? And number two, what do you see and when you see this back and forth using Signal?
So no and no way. And it just shows it's blatant disregard for these security rules and why they exist. It just shows a level of lazy and incompetence that is hard to comprehend. There's a reason why we used to have security trainings over and over again, and why we were told repeatedly that we should assume all of our unclassified systems, our emails, our phones, we should have assumed that they were penetrated by foreign actors, because foreign actors were repeatedly trying to go after them. This is what we knew. This is fact. This is something that's very well known. It's shocking to see, but there's another part, and I want to make sure I explain this, because Tulsi Gabbard is going out there saying that, oh, there's no classified material on this. And she's trying to make a distinction between pieces of classified intelligence, analysis, maybe raw intelligence that is given to senior leadership versus deliberations. There is no daylight between those two. Sure, it's different kinds of classified information, but deliberations are automatically confidential. They might be at different levels of classification, but automatically, to me, not only is this a complete obvious security violation and they're endangering their own plans and their own troops, but it's also a PR disaster. They should come out instead of doubling down and saying, you know what, we messed up, we made a mistake, it won't happen again, and these are the consequences. We're gonna make sure we don't do it again. But no, we certainly never did anything like this. I was called to the White House in the middle of the night sometimes because you couldn't have conversations like this on an open line of any kind, anything connected to the internet or anything that could be penetrated in a certain room.